So the last time I read, Hammer had stood up for David by beating up Charlie Sims after Charlie Sims hit David. And Mama was getting ready for the sheriff to come, and she was going to make some molasses cake. All right. So let me see where I left off. Okay. Mama, it wasn't too long after that. This is where he was limping behind her and she was kind of giving him orders. It wasn't too long after that that the sheriff showed up. Sheriff Peterson Rankins, his name was. He was a large-sized fellow, sandy hair and a mustache. Looked like he was always burned by the sun. He'd been up to our place before. He'd even come for water. Mama and Papa, they was always cordial to him, but they ain't never got close, not like some folks did with him. Mama and Papa, they always kept their distance. They said it was best that way. Anyways, he came to our place riding a stallion, stepped down from his horse, and went over to the well. We were looking out the window watching him, waiting for him. He didn't bother to come up to the house and ask if he could have himself a drink. He just took off the lid that covered the well and pulled himself up a bucket. Mama heaved a heavy sigh and thanked the Lord Mr. Tom B. and Joe were gone. Then she said to me, "All right now, David, you watch out for your ma, Rachel. She napping now, but she wake up, you make sure she don't see that sheriff, and make sure she don't come out. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I'll take care of her." Mama nodded, set her jaw, pulled the door open, and then stepped out. I watched her in the darkness of the room. The sheriff took his drink and looked up. Mama stopped right where she was on the stone doorstep. The sheriff, he took his full of water, poured what he didn't want for thirst back in the bucket, and came over. "Well, how do there, Caroline?" he asked. "Just fine," Mama answered. "Water there still sweet?" The sheriff glanced back at the well. "Finest water in the county, always said so. Y'all are blessed, Caroline. Without that water, don't know what half the folks around here would have done." Mama gave a nod, and he came up the side yard and stopped just before he reached the step. "I understand Paul Edward and your oldest boys, they're gone lumbering?" "Yes, sir, that's right," Mama said. The sheriff grunted, then got on with his business. "Suppose you know how come I'm here." Mama just looked at him for a minute, and then she said, "All I know is what my boy David in there done told me." "David?" said the sheriff. "You mean to tell me he's around here?" "He's around," said Mama. "Then you tell him to get on out here. He's taking care of Ma Rachel. Best we talk just you and me." The sheriff met her eyes, and his eyes narrowed down. He waited a moment, then he said, "Where's that Hammer?" "Hammer? Don't rightly know where that boy is." "You better know after what he gone and done. You sure enough better know." Mama stood straight and tall. "What he done?" "Thought you said David done told you." "He told me his side, but he ain't told me what you're gonna say." The sheriff sighed, took off his hat, and mopped his brow with a large handkerchief. Then he mopped the sweat from the inside of his hat band. "Charlie Sims, that's old Mr. McAllister Sims' boy. He just got hit in the head. His brother Ed Rose come and got me. I gone over to the Simses' place, and old McAllister's about fit to be tied." He stuffed the handkerchief back in his pocket, slapped the hat back on his head, and stared direct at Mama. Mama waited, still as a windless day. "Charlie told me your boys, Hammer and David, done half killed him with a side of lumber." "The boy, he all right?" "Yeah, he's got some bruises, but I figure his feelings smarting more than them bruises." "You done said Charlie Sims said both Hammer and David done hit him?" "Yeah, that's right." Mama frowned and didn't say anything. "That the story you heard?" That's what he told you. Then you got no call to believe what my boys done told me. And just what was that? You gonna take my boy's word over the Simses? Just tell me. Mama glanced back toward the kitchen. If you don't mind, Sheriff Rankins, I got my supper on cooking. Ma Rachel, she been feeling poorly, so I ain't got nobody to watch it for me. You mind if I see to my food? You mind if we talk in the kitchen? Well, I suppose no matter what your boy's gone and done, you folks still gotta eat. Go on, lead the way. Mama nodded. She left the doorway and stepped along the stones that led to the back porch. I left the window, checked on Ma Rachel, seen her still napping in her room. Then I took off to the pantry where I could watch what was going on in the kitchen house. The sheriff and Mama stood on the walkway in front of the kitchen door. The smell of molasses bread was strong. The sheriff sniffed the air and looked at Mama. What's that I smell cooking? Just my molasses bread, said Mama. Excuse me, but I best check on it before it burns. Please take yourself a seat on the bench there. With that, she gone into the kitchen house. The sheriff, he sniffed the air again, then sat down, took off his hat, and laid it on the bench. He crossed his legs and looked out across the yard. He seemed right calm, not at all hurried about taking Hammer and me in. There was a window in that kitchen, and I could see Mama taking out a long pan of molasses bread and setting them on the side shelf right next to the door. The sheriff could see her, too. No, I ain't had molasses bread, and since I don't know when. I expect not since our cook, Aunt Cora, died more than a year ago. Now, that old woman could sure enough cook. My wife, well, she just ain't got the touch for cooking like Aunt Cora had. We got ourselves a young girl now come up to help her out. But she ain't much got the touch neither. Mama came out of the kitchen and nodded as if the sheriff, not having any molasses bread, was of some great concern to her. But she said nothing. The sheriff glanced through the door at those great pans of bread cooling on the sideboard and cleared his throat. It sure does look mighty good. Well, let me get you a piece, Mama said, and went back into the kitchen. She cut a sizable square of the bread, plopped a heaping spoonful of newly churned butter on top, and took it to the sheriff along with a large glass of fresh buttermilk. The sheriff thanked her, took a hefty bite of the molasses bread and butter, and smiled. Then he cleared his throat and looked at Mama. So what your boys done said happened, Caroline? Well, according to my boy David, him and Hammer was walking along the road when they run across Charlie Sims. The Sims boy needed help putting a wheel back on his wagon. He done asked them to help him out. David, he done held the wagon up for Charlie Sims to put the wheel back on, but he done told the Sims boy he couldn't hold it much longer and that he had to let it go. And that's what he done. He let it go. Well, Charlie Sims, he done hit him for letting it go. Hit him and knocked him down off his crutch. You know my David, he done broke his leg a few weeks back. He been having to use the crutch ever since. Well, anyways, David said that's what Charlie Sims done to him, and Hammer done beat him for it, with his fist, mind you. He ain't used no side of lumber, nothing else, just his fist. He hit Charlie Sims with his fist. And Charlie Sims done fell back on the rock and hit his head, and that's what done knocked him out. The sheriff grunted and finished his molasses bread. He wiped the plate clean. Mama waited. He drank his buttermilk. Mama waited. Finally, he put the plate down on the bench and sighed. That was sure mighty good, Caroline, mighty good. Thank you. I sure wouldn't mind taking a piece home, let my wife have a taste. There's plenty, said Mama. You're welcome to it. The sheriff nodded his gratitude. Mama stood there, still waiting. The sheriff sighed and looked at her. Now, Caroline, you know I can't just go around allowing Hammer to go around hitting a white boy. Hammer and David, they got to pay for what they done. David ain't touched Charlie Sims. Well, that's David's story. David don't lie. Well, that may be, but I can't hardly go believing him over Charlie now, can I? That's up to you, I reckon. The sheriff was silent again, studying on the matter. He drank the last of his buttermilk and set the glass down beside the plate. Then he got up. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to go talk to old man McAllister Sims and see if I can get him not to press charges on this thing. I'll see if maybe he'll accept Hammer and David working for him for a spell. I think he'll see how he can come out ahead with this thing instead of me taking the boys to jail. Mama nodded. We'd be obliged if you could work that out in some way. We ain't wanting our boys in no jail. Well, fact of the matter is, you and Paul Edward, y'all been mighty Christian, letting folks use your water like you've been. A lot of folks couldn't have made it. They couldn't count on this water. I ain't forgetting that. Well, the water, it wasn't never ours to give. The good Lord done put it there. The sheriff nodded. Still, some folks might not have been so willing to share. But you listen to me, Caroline, and heed my words. This better not happen again. That boy Hammer get in trouble one more time, he going to jail. He don't end up hanging from a tree first. That boy is wild, and I don't care how Christian you and Paul Edward be. That boy don't straighten up. There ain't gonna be no saving him. You understand me now? I understand. The sheriff picked up his hat from the bench and put it back on. Mama went back into the kitchen, covered a whole pan of uncut molasses bread with a clean cloth, set it in a basket, and gave it to the sheriff. The sheriff grinned on seeing that long pan of molasses bread, gave a nod of thanks to Mama, and then headed back up the walkway, and Mama followed him. I left the pantry, ran through the house to a window looking out on the side yard, and just about died when I saw who had just pulled up the driveway. Charlie, Ed Rose, and their daddy, old man McAllister Sims. Now, Charlie and Ed Rose might have been mean, but that there daddy of theirs, old man McAllister Sims, was rock bottom, ornery mean. Just about everybody was scared of him, and that included those children of his. It was said old man McAllister Sims, he'd had himself two families, one by a wife near about same age as him, and after she died, a young wife, younger than his youngest daughter. Charlie and Ed Rose were part of that second family, and two of the youngest of the old man McAllister's 12 children. Sheriff Rankins, he saw the Simses coming up too, so did Mama. Mama stopped near the side door and didn't go out to the drive. The sheriff did, though. He hooked the basket of molasses bread onto his saddle and then went over to the Simses' wagon. Old man McAllister Sims halted the wagon and shouted, "Where are they? Where those N-words done hit my Charlie?" The sheriff spoke softly. I couldn't hear what he said. Whatever it wasn't satisfying Mr. McAllister Sims. He was sure enough a hard one. That old man McAllister Sims said, "I want 'em, and I want some now. Ain't gonna let no low down N-words get away with this." The sheriff, he gone on talking soft like. Old man McAllister Sims sat on the wagon seat frowning, looking meaner than ever. Finally, he gave a nod, and the sheriff stepped away from the wagon and motioned to Mama to come over. "Caroline," he called, "you come on over here now. Tell that boy David to get on out here too." Before Mama could call me, I had the door open and was out. "Where's Ma Rachel?" she asked. "She's still sleeping," I said. "At least that's something," Mama said, and crossed the side yard to the wagon with me by her side. Up close to Charlie now, I could see his face was all bruised up and swollen, and there was a wrapping around the top of his head. If I wasn't standing there so scared, I would have smiled with a lot of satisfaction that my brother Hammer had given Charlie the whipping that he'd had coming for him for so long. But there was no smiling right then. Hammer and I were in trouble. I didn't want any more. "Now, Caroline," said the sheriff, "I done talked to Mr. Sims and his boys, Charlie and Ed Rose here, and he done agreed not to put your boys in jail. Instead, he's going to be mighty generous with y'all and let your boys work the summer off at his place. Seeing your boys done half crippled Charlie. There's a lot got to be done. Charlie would have been doing his own self. Your boys haven't beaten him so bad. Your boy's going to have to take up the slack." Mama nodded. "All right, then. Starting tomorrow." Oh, Mama nodded. "All right, then. Starting tomorrow, first thing." The sheriff then turned to his horse and got ready to mount. But then old man McAllister Sims said, I want 'em whipped. Mama nodded, yes, sir. I plans to get on him about this when I see him. He won't be doing this again. No, sir. When his papa come home, he'll wear him out. Old man Sim shook his head. Nah, that ain't the way it's gonna be. But their papa, he ain't here, Mama said. I saw fear in her eyes. Then you do it, said old man McAllister Sims. You strong-looking gal, you welt them boys good yourself. You don't, I will. Mama shook her head, not saying no, just unbelieving. Hammer, he ain't here. Then you get him. Get him back here and you lay a strap to him and this boy too. We ain't going till you do. The sheriff looked at Mama, then turned to the old man. Now look here, Mr. Sims. I don't think there's a call for that. No call? Them N-words done jump my boy, ain't they? If I had my way, I'd do more than lay a strap to 'em. I remember a time we would have done already took them out to a tree for what they done. Can still do it. Don't want that kind of talk now. Ain't gonna just be talk. I have to wait up here much longer. One of them get away with hitting a white man. What you think gonna come next? I got a good mind to deal with this my own way. Me and mine. I get finished with them, I guarantee you, they won't be raising their fist again to another white man. The sheriff stared at him. Then I suppose he was figuring there was nothing else he could do, because he turned back to Mama and said, Caroline, you best get Hammer and your whipping strap, and you do what you're told about Hammer and David. But David ain't done nothing. He ain't hit that boy, Charlie Sims. Now, Caroline, started the sheriff, but then old man McAllister broke in. You meaning to stand there, gal, and tell me just one of your boys done this to Charlie? Mama pulled to her full height and clasped her hands. Yes, sir. Your boy done hit my David. You can see he's got a bad leg here. My hammer done hit your boy 'cause of it. As afraid as Mama must have been, I could still hear the pride in her voice over Hammer for standing up for me. Scared as I was, I couldn't help myself from being proud too. Old man McAllister Sims turned his mean old eyes onto Charlie. Thought you said both them boys jumped on you. Charlie's eyes went wild. He looked at Ed Rose, the sheriff, who was standing silent as if not wanting to get into this. Well, it's the truth, Daddy. She lying. That David, he lying too. It was both of them jumped me. I'd have been looking like this if they'd have fought me fair. No, sir, they jumped me, both of them, from behind, Pa, and they ain't even gave me a chance to defend myself. It's the truth, Daddy. It's the truth. Old man McAllister Sims stared into Charlie, then slowly turned and looked not at Mama, but at the sheriff, at another white man, and said, if I thought Charlie couldn't beat one little N-word, I'd whip him myself. Had to be both of them jumped him. Now, what you gonna do? Sheriff Peterson Rankins nodded, as if that was a certainty, that no lone little Negro boy could whip a near-grown white boy. After all, what would it look like if one black boy could whip a white boy who was bigger and older? You done heard, Caroline. Now go get Hammer and get that whipping strap. Mama bit her lower lip. She looked down at me and she shook her head. No, sir. No. I ain't gonna whip my David. He ain't done anything. He ain't done the hitting. I touched her arm. Hammer, he done what he done 'cause of me, Mama. I'll take my licking right side him. Mama's eyes looked straight into mine and they were full. All right then, she said. Go on and get your brother. I backed away, not wanting to leave Mama alone, but I knew I had to go. She gave me a nod, letting me know she'd be all right. So I turned and would have gone for Hammer right then if it hadn't been for Ma Rachel. She was standing in the doorway. What's going on out there, Caroline? Ma Rachel called. What them white folks doing on our land? Fast as I could, I limped back to the house, trying to stop Ma Rachel before she said too much more. She was still standing in the doorway when I got to her, but her talking ain't stopped. "What's they doing?" she asked me. "That's the sheriff. That Peter Rankins standing up there." "What you doing here, Peter Rankins?" she hollered. "Your mama know you up here. I'm sure enough gonna tell her." "Ma Rachel," I said, trying to stay as quiet as I could, trying to keep Ma Rachel quiet, trying not to upset her any more. But Ma Rachel kept ran loudly too. And there I was, a little old boy on a crutch, trying to keep my grandmama from cussing out these white folks and getting us into even more trouble. "Ma Rachel, come back inside now, please," I pleaded. "Come on back." "What are they doing here?" she asked me. "They've just come for water, like always," I lied. "They'll be gone in a minute." "You, N-word!" cried Mr. McAllister Sims. "Don't you think you can get away? I'll see you dead, you try." I glanced back, saw the sheriff and Mama talking to Mr. Sims, and hoped none of these crazy Simses would come to the house after me. "What they means?" cried Ma Rachel. "I heard 'em. What they mean?" I took Ma Rachel's arm. "You know Mr. McAllister Sims, Ma Rachel. You know how he talks. He just talking and being mean and ornery like he always is. Well, I wants him off this land, yes. I wants him all off. Yes, I said again and led her back into the house. "Got no business here. They done took my name. They got no business here." "Yes, I said one more time, and wondered how I was going to get Hammer with Ma Rachel's mind off in the last century again. Lord must have seen me struggling there in my confusion, because it was then that Aunt Callie came up onto the back porch. "What's going on here, David?" she said as soon as she was in the house and saw me holding on to Ma Rachel. "Heard hollering. What's going on?" Aunt Callie, like always, had come up to the house the back way, and she hadn't seen all the commotion by the well on the other side. Ma Rachel sat down in her rocker and stared out at the drive. Aunt Callie's gaze followed hers. "They's on our land," said Ma Rachel, softly, as if that should explain everything that needed explaining. "They's on our land." I motioned to Aunt Callie, and we left Ma Rachel staring out the window and went to the back porch. I told Aunt Callie right quick what was going on. Aunt Callie turned toward the drive. "It's going to be all right," I said. "Mama done worked it out with the sheriff. All Hammer and me got to do is take this licking, that's all. But I got to go get him. I got to get him now." Aunt Callie looked around nervously and nodded. "Then you go on. I'll take care of Mom." I glanced through the window at Ma Rachel, still sitting where we'd left her, staring out at the drive. Looked at Aunt Callie once more, then took off down the porch fast as I could on that gimpy one leg of mine. I crossed to the deep woods on the other side of the pasture and made my way along the cow path, then crossed through brush and grass where there was no path at all, till I came to where Halton and Hammer were waiting at Papa's praying rock. It was a good place to wait. Papa prayed there every day when he was home. I took a moment to get my breath. Then I told him everything. Everything about the sheriff, about the Simses, about the whipping strap, waiting for Hammer and me. I told him we had to hurry. Hammer shook his head and sat down. "Nah, I ain't going." "But you gotta," I said. "It's the only way out of this thing." I said I ain't going. I looked up at Halton, needing his help. Hammer could be as stubborn as an old mule, and I knew he meant what he said. Halton looked at me, looked at Hammer, and his sunny face took on a downward set. "Hammer, now you listen to me, boy. You think you can lay me out the way you done Charlie Sims?" Hammer's eyes narrowed and he turned to Halton. "Why would I want to lay you out?" "Because that's what you're going to have to do. You don't get up off that stump and get on back to the house and get this thing over with. Because you don't, I'm going to knock you out and take you back." Hammer crossed his arms. "Then, Halton, you're going to have to knock me out, because I ain't going. I ain't taking no lick in front of the likes of Charlie Sims." "Boy, use your head," I said. "This is serious, and I'm going to take a licking too. I don't want to, but I'm going to take it, because we're going to have to leave this place. We stay and don't take this licking and then go to work for the Simses, there ain't going to be nothing but trouble and heartache for this family. Now, you figure Charlie Sims and your pride worth killing our family for?" Hammer didn't say a word. I laid my crutch upon the ground. Now, I know you bigger than I am, and you can most likely whip me, but I'm going to try and whip you myself to make you get up from there and come on back. Hammer just sat there. I balled up my fist. Well, for the first time, Hammer smiled. Boy, pick up that crutch, he said. Then he glanced at Halton and got up. I take this whipping. I ain't going to cry for him. Halton and I both laughed. What you mean you ain't gonna cry, you little scound, said Halton. Little hard-headed scound, you never do cry. Come on, I said, and got my crutch. Let's get it over with. Whew, so we have to, we're going to find out how that ends the next time I read. I think we only have one little section left, so we will read the resolution to the well next time.